Well, stocks just made a new all-time high yet again. This is a consecutive thing. Now, the big thing that you guys are probably going to ask is, well, Nick, while the stock market is making new all-time highs, why does the crypto market look like this today? Well, there's a few things that I want to go over, but the main thing to focus on here is, and I know that it really kind of comes down to the most cliche excuse, manipulation. Yeah, that's right. The market is being manipulated against you. It wants you out. These big market makers and the big whales are shaking the tree yet again, right before the biggest event around this market, as well as the traditional markets, aka the FOMC meeting. Now, I'm going to go over this here in a moment, but I want to go back to stocks because we just hit 6,600. We are now inching closer and closer to my 6960 target. And the biggest thing about stocks that you want to focus on is when they get boring. Because right now, stocks are very, very exciting. Everyone is focused on stocks because guess what? They're pumping. This is very exciting. And this is taking a lot of attention away from other investments, like, for an example, crypto. However, we will catch up to stocks. It goes all the way back here, right, to when we started to see the market really picking up for crypto. It was back in November. Now, yes, stocks also were doing very good during this time. Ultimately, even during the summer, stocks continued to make new all-time highs while the market for crypto was still down. It was boring. Nobody liked crypto because they were like, well, guess what? I could be making so much money over in the stock market. Why am I still sitting in crypto? And then crypto sold off, or the stock market sold off into the beginning of August. Now, it did bounce back, but it took some time. In fact, it took all the way up until roughly the end of September for stocks to bounce back. And even then, it started to kind of get boring. And this is what led an inflow of people into crypto. And of course, during this time, crypto was going insane. Right now, stocks are doing extremely well. I mean, think about it like this, right? From the beginning of September to where we are at currently, we are still up 4+%. I know this doesn't sound like much on the S&P, but it is. This is extremely exciting for anyone that is trading traditional stocks. Now, outside of this, crypto, since the beginning of September, really hasn't been doing much. Yes, there has been some nice gains over like the last week or so, but for the most part, a lot of things are pretty shallow. I mean, HBAR is up 3.1% on the week. Most altcoins are around those same figures, if not a little bit less. Even XRP only up 1.4%. And looking at the last week here, and even looking at the last month, I mean, there hasn't really been that crazy amount of gains within the crypto space. And a lot of people are wondering, why aren't we following stocks? Why aren't we going crazy like the stock market? And really, it just comes down to the idea that they want to shake you out right before the biggest move in the market begins. On top of that, we're also at a time where, you know, stocks are extremely exciting. So they are going to take over a bit, just like gold did back in like the middle of, well, it actually wasn't even the middle. It was more so like the beginning of, I want to say February into March or so. It was right after the trade war and the tariff discussion started to heat up a bit more. But regardless of that, you know, this is why we focus on other markets, because when something is getting boring, something else is getting exciting. It's just liquidity being tossed around from market to market. That's why I also said that we're not yet in alt season. It's just liquidity flows. Now, taking a quick look at the market right now, yes, we did hit a high of like 4.09 trillion, just for us to sell back off down to 3.99 trillion. Fear and greed around 51, nothing too crazy there. And then altcoin season index 71 out of 100. Again, not a crazy change here at all. Across the board from, you know, when I updated you guys previously. But the one thing that I want to look at is Bitcoin. So, you know, Bitcoin is selling off. We did see Michael Saylor buy more Bitcoin. Typically when he buys Bitcoin, we do see a little bit of a drop in the market. This is very common. It's been something that I have been following for quite some time. If you guys have been, following Michael Saylor's buys for like the last 24 months or so, then you would also know that every single time that he buys, we typically see a sell-off in the market on Bitcoin. Now, when we think about this, is it a lasting sell-off? No, it's typically a shallow pullback in the market right before the market heats up yet again. And I do believe that we are going to see the market heat up yet again going into the FOMC day. Right now, we are having a pullback and essentially, in my opinion, a shakeout right before the FOMC meeting. And Ethereum is also not shy to this. And then also XRP kind of doing the opposite here a bit, where we're already starting to jump off of those lows. Ethereum is still pretty flat. Bitcoin is also still pretty flat here. Now, also another reason why we are having a pullback and a sell-off in this market is because of where we closed at on the total 3. So the total 3, aka the altcoin market, did close right at resistance, right at those highs going back to the beginning of December and also kind of like the middle of December. Now, I've said it many times over, and I even said it going into the weekly candle close. I said we have to get a close over this $1.13 trillion level on the altcoin market, or we're not going to have a much larger breakout. It's not going to sustain this big push to the upside. So we didn't get that close. We closed right around resistance, and now we're probably just going to chop here until we see that big push to the upside. Now, I do think that that push to the upside begins after the FOMC meeting. We'll probably have some volatility this week, and we should start to see a much larger breakout going into the weekend. And then next week should be very, very good because of the market heating up. I think that the FOMC meeting is going to light the match. And then from that point on, the fire will spread and things will start to heat up very, very fast. But beyond that, Bitcoin also hitting that 116.9K level. This is major support that we have to flip. It's also resistance on the chart. So we hit that. The main thing that I'm looking at now is just for us to retest this red zone, chop a little bit here, retest this 116.9K level, and potentially get a big break over it. And even then, we are still not out of the water. On the 3-day structure, what I'm mainly looking at is for us to break over this 116.9K level and then clear $120,000. There's a lot of resistance within this area up here, and this will essentially become that new red zone once we start to get past some of these key levels like 116.9K. So just be a little bit more patient here. This is also why I said, just kind of stick through the volatility. This is going to be a very volatile week. Have some stablecoins on the sidelines for buying, but for the most part, we should get through this, and we should be looking very good once we come out on the other side. Now, talking about the Fed meeting. If we're thinking about XRP and we're thinking about HBAR and all of these other altcoins, the main thing that we are watching for is all of the events circulating around the FOMC meeting. For an example, we have this over here from Cointelegraph. Key upcoming events this week. Tuesday, August retail sales data. Wednesday, Fed rate decision, FOMC press conference, and Fed dot plot projections. Thursday, Philly Fed manufacturing index. And then Thursday, we also get the initial jobless claims data. Will the market pump or dump this week? Now, I strongly believe that this market is going to heat up just like we saw back in September of last year as well, because September 18th was when we got our rate cut back in 2024. This time around, it's September 17th. Now, if we're thinking about Bitcoin during 2024, let's get rid of the RSI. Let's just go back here real quick into September. So again, September 18th was our FOMC day. This is when we got the official rate cut in September. It caused Bitcoin to surge all the way back to 66.5K. Now, did it make a new high? No, it didn't. What happened was it created a higher high on the lower time frame structure. We made a high over the August highs. Then we created a higher low going into the, first half of October. After that, we started to break to a new higher high. This is what I'm watching for right now, currently in this market now, where yes, we'll probably sell off into the FOMC day, right? We should start to see a big push to the upside where we do take out some of the lower time frame highs. We don't necessarily need to create a new all-time high right off the rip where we just go crazy. No, all we need to do is take out the high going back to roughly the end of August. So, this is how a perfect world would look, where we're chopping, we find support right around those highs. This is resistance. We break to the upside. Maybe we even tap those highs slightly, right? Sell off a little bit more. Then we finally get that big break. This would be a perfect world scenario. This would also be a very healthy scenario. There's a lot of possibilities that could happen, right? We could also have the Fed shock the system and say, guess what? We're not cutting rates at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, we see Bitcoin collapse. That's also a possibility. But I am on the side of CME Group, which is telling us that in 2 days, so 48 hours away, we are going to have a 100% chance of a rate cut decision happening. And if we are going to see this, the entire market should wake up just like back in September. We should create lower time frame bullish structure where we are breaking to new highs. We're creating higher highs, creating higher lows, and we should start to continue to break out to 130,000 plus on Bitcoin. This will also lead to Ethereum breaking even higher, confirming its all-time high break over the 2021 highs, and we should start to see the altcoin market also continuing to break over its previous highs back in December, going to the next stop that I do have on this chart at 1.45 trillion, and even then, we should start to reach for almost $3 trillion on the altcoin market, which will potentially be the top for altcoins. The entire crypto market itself should hit about roughly $7 to $10 trillion. A $10 trillion market cap for crypto could definitely be possible. But also when we think about the FOMC meeting, the reason why I'm also on the side of the fence where we are really kind of believing that this is going to be our first rate cut decision is because of what we have been hearing from some prominent names. JP Morgan just told us 25 BPS. I mentioned this in a video recently. I do believe that this is going to be the case. I think that we get a 25 BPS cut initially. October could definitely be a 50 BPS cut. And then also December could also be another 50 BPS cut. That would be huge, but there's a 100% chance of a rate cut happening on all three of these dates. And that's 3 rate cuts to end off the year, just like back in 2024. This is something that I think is possible 100%. And even when we go over here to this video clip from September 6th, this is Fed Gov Waller talking about rate cuts and the path ahead. He said, in a bombshell announcement, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller has urgently called for immediate interest rate cuts. Waller stated that we need to start cutting rates at the next meeting. Over the next 3 to 6 months, we could see multiple cuts coming in. Check this out.
For me, I think we need to start cutting rates at the next meeting, and then we don't have to go in a locked sequence of steps. We can kind of see where things are going because people are still worried about tariff inflation. I'm not, but everybody else is. So I would say over the next 3 to 6 months, we could see multiple cuts coming in.
Now, obviously, when we think about this, right, we typically see 3 rate cuts in that year where we do start to see the Fed cutting rates. We already saw the Fed cut rates back in 2024. The difference here is that every other central bank around the world has cut rates. I mean, it's crazy that it's taken the US this long. However, we did have an environment that really called for us to just hold rates where they were. The tariff discussions, the trade war, there was a lot of ammunition for the Fed to hold. Now, there really isn't much there at all for the Fed to cling on to and say, guess what? We shouldn't cut rates now. Yes, a lot of people are still worried about the economy. Everyone's still worried about the, major signals of, a potential recession hitting. A lot of people thought that we were already in a recession back in 2023, 2024. Today, the biggest thing that we're looking at for the, Fed to say, guess what, we should cut rates is the jobs reports, right? The labor market is starting to weaken, which tells us that we should start to see rate cuts happen. And this would be the perfect time for that. So September, October, December, I think that we get a rate cut in every single one of these months. And if we're thinking about that right now, stocks all-time highs, incredible to see Bitcoin still around 115K. the entire market for crypto still hovering around $4 trillion. I think that almost every single one of these markets are going to go substantially higher over the coming weeks and months ahead, because again, it just makes a lot of sense from the idea of interest rates getting dropped, which will lead to more liquidity hitting the system, which will also lead to these markets rising. And also think about it like this: the M2 supply has been going insane over the last couple weeks and months, and we've been following that. We've been tracking it because the M2 supply expanding to the upside will also take markets to the upside. So this is leading me to, really kind of come to the conclusion that we're going to pump into the end of the year. Quarter 1, 2026, it's questionable on what happens. That's why we really kind of take it one step at a time. We see how things look week over week. But as we get closer to the end of the year, we should have a lot more price data to go off of to really kind of tell us exactly where we're at. But overall, market's looking very good. I know that this pullback is probably going to scare a few people, but I'm not too concerned at all with this. We might get a little bit of a deeper wick here on Bitcoin. It could scare a lot of people, but this is healthy price action, and I do think that it's a shakeout right before we have a big push to the upside. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.